Technology Group. I am Ali Adib, and this is a closed beta project, the show where we talk to IT, cybersecurity experts, pioneers, and influencers about how we can live and grow in the digital age. Let's start with the introductions. I mean, everyone knows you. You're famous now.
Unfortunately, yes. I end up on these way more often than I should, I feel like.
You're the one that actually shows up. Nobody else actually.
Is that the key? Do I just not show up?
Oh, no, don't do that.
Like what I need to start doing?
No, please don't.
Yeah, okay.
Jonathan can introduce me.
You're a good example.
Yeah.
No, can you actually introduce yourself? And then if he wants to add into it.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Eric.
So I'm Eric Shoemaker. I'm one of the senior security architects with Lockstep Technology Group. And that's what I do.
Eric's a Jedi.
Okay. Cool,
That's
cool.
Yeah. So he's gonna be humble here. Eric's one of the Jedis that is coming up with interesting solutions, and he's definitely one of the best engineers I've ever met. So he's gonna be humble, but yes, he's one of our senior security engineers, and he's very good at what he does.
Awesome. So what are we doing here? You found something interesting. And then can you tell me that story, like how it begun?
So on these podcasts, I know that the foundational security assessment has been mentioned many times. Mm-hmm. We were doing one of these for an organization that had roughly 20,000 users. And as part of this, we do entitlement reviews. We go in, we look at all the privileged accounts in the environment, both in the domain, across servers, across workstations. And when we were looking at the list, it was much larger than normal, than what we would expect. We pull a sampling, but when we produced our report, it ended up at 600 pages or something like that. It was just insane. This is normally a 50, 60-page report. So as we were looking, we realized that it was local accounts that they had way more than normal. And as we looked at these, we found that there was a very specific nomenclature to these accounts. They were all named FS admin with a string of 9 numbers. Now, there were 4 or 5 of these accounts across every machine, and they were the same account. So as I started doing research on what these accounts could be, I came across the Casaya website, the Kasaya documentation, and realized they were related to the Casaya VSA, their RMM. And these accounts are specifically related to the LAN cache feature of that RMM that this organization had turned on. And as I was doing the research on this product and on these accounts and how they were used, it became clear to me that it was probable that these accounts all use the same password. So we were able to demonstrate exploitation of this to our customer and give them a lot of feedback on what was possible. What was really disturbing about this, all of these accounts were in the local administrators group. Now, what's interesting is they also had domain controllers that had the RMM installed, and they were assigned to a LAN cache as a LAN cache client. And what we observed there was these same accounts existed on the domain in the administrators group. And when we took this back to them, we were able to show that we could compromise one workstation with one of these accounts, get the hash, pass that hash straight to the domain, and have admin rights on a domain controller immediately.
Whoa.
So that's, we recently published this research. MITRE issued a CVE for this, and I don't remember the CVE number, but we have it on our blog.
CVE number is 2019 14510, 14510. So that's the CVE number.
Yeah, so that's kind of the high-level overview of what we have. There's a couple of blog articles. I know you're probably going to mention those.
Yeah. And then you wrote 2 of them, one for blue team, one for red team. Why did you write it for both teams?
Okay, so the reason I did that is I wanted to demonstrate, one, how we exploited this. Mm-hmm. And that's for the red team, right? And for any pen tester, this is basic, Metasploit 101 stuff, right? But in this context, it's really important because this was a large organization. It was a big environment, and they had no idea that this was possible. So I wanted to bring out and show just how easy this was. My Red Team article shows that we just used off-the-shelf scripts from GitHub to do this. The Blue Team article, though, is focused more on the IT side of things, on defending the network, knowing that this is a thing. What can I do about it? Like, why is this important? A little bit of research into how this happens and helping organizations not do this.
Mm-hmm. So on the, just to kind of give the non-security, IT security people an idea of what he's talking about here, there's generally two primary fields that technical IT security people fall into, and they're either red or blue. Okay. So red is offensive. These are the adversaries, the people that are always testing, always trying to exploit, always doing things. I'm natively an adversary, and so I would call myself a red teamer at heart. Blue team is the opposite of this. Blue team is the native defenders who are constantly attempting to stop the adversaries, and they obviously approach things from very different perspectives. How would you identify yourself? Are you a native blue team guy, or are you an adversary?
I thought he was a Jedi.
So I'm a native blue team guy.
Okay.
But this actually brings up an important thing that I sort of subscribe to. I think that all blue team guys should understand how to be adversarial.
Very good. Excellent. Yes.
And know how the offensive security side of things works.
Right.
Because you can't defend against what you don't understand.
Totally correct. And that's 100% right. In my opinion, blue team's job is a little harder because reds just needs us to work one thing to work one time. And blue's job is to, protect from this vast, list of things that the adversaries can do to exploit your environment. So just for the people that are not IT security people, that's generally the technical side of offense and defense in this world. So the reason Eric wrote 2 articles, which is fantastic, is because you look at this from different perspectives. One is what is this? Understand it. What do I do to stop this or reduce the amount of risk in my environment, or at least understand it and accept it? And then the other side is, how can I use this to exploit or to complete my task, which is to, exploit an environment or to, get to the end of a pen test or whatever that is. So that's really the background behind why he wrote 2 as opposed to 1, which is really good.
So does Casaya know that we found this, or they have this, can we say vulnerability or weakness?
Yes. I worked with Casaya when I found this. I notified them immediately. They already knew about the potential issue. I showed it from a different perspective, though. So I did bring out a different aspect of this, and this is when a domain controller acts as a client to the LAN cache, not hosting the LAN cache. So the same vulnerability may not be their best term, which we can talk about that in a little bit, but it's a weakness in their system that it's just a design decision that makes it easier in certain circumstances. In this circumstance, though, when you put this on a domain controller as a client and you use the default method, which is it goes ahead and creates these FS admin accounts for you, which you shouldn't do. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. Don't use the default method. Use some other methods that they prescribe. But when you do this, it creates the account, gives it a password that's the same password everywhere, and puts it in the administrators group automatically. Kasaya knew about this. This was a design decision to make it easier to deploy.
Okay.
So
let us walk everyone through like an attack scenario here, as opposed to this is possible, that's possible, why do I care? Let's say you've got a user who clicks on a phishing email or something like that, and they become compromised, and you're using this service let's say that they are able to get administrator access on this machine or some other method of being able to pull the accounts and passwords or hashes from the local system, which is a very easy thing to do in most cases. Many people have local administrator access before, they give them to users. So let's say, we find that regularly.
Absolutely.
So let's say that you give your users local administrator access on their machines. Well, that means your attacker, who all they did was send you a phishing email, now has the ability to pull those accounts and passwords and such from your system. This account is in there.
Okay.
This account is in there. At that point, you have as many rights as you need if you follow this method. So that's the end of needing to get to privilege escalation and lateral movement. You're all the way up to complete rights on the domain controller, which is ultimately usually the goal of any penetration test. Get as high level of rights as you can to do whatever you wish. And in that case, if this account in this architecture is made in that way, it's over. You don't need to go any further. Just by phishing that one user and having their existing credentials on that box. So, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's the end of it right there from a simple phishing attack.
Yeah, so you get that box, you dump those local hashes, and then you check the domain to see if any other accounts have those hashes. In this case, it's the same exact account name with the same exact hash, and you just pass it, and immediately you've pivoted directly to a domain controller as administrator. From there, you own the rest of the environment because all the other machines, all the other resources in the domain depend on the domain controllers. And you can push out group policies. You can do all sorts of things to move laterally from there.
Or ransomware or, whatever, you take your pick on whatever you want to do at that point. But, the point here is that it's a complete domain compromise in a very short list of easy steps. This is not some crazy nation state level attack or anything like that. This is very easy to do, and could be used and exploited by a very new tester or something like that. So and the reason we bring this up is something else we wanted to bring up in this was that we're not throwing shade on Casaya here. And Eric's already mentioned this. We're not here to say don't use Casaya. We're not here to say don't use their product. It's a great product. They know about this. In this case, this is not, and Eric, I'll let you kind of talk about this. This is not something that is a Windows patch. It's a configuration that could lead to potential compromise. So do you want to kind of talk about the relationship between what this is and just understanding it and their decision and things like that?
Yeah, so the LAN cache feature, and I want to point out too, that is a great feature that you should use. It's designed very much like an SCCM distribution point where you centralize your patches across a low bandwidth link to a site so that you don't have a lot of clients saturating a link to pull applications, patches, whatever. You centralize it in a repository locally and then assign clients to it to pull those patches. That's fantastic. In this case, it's just when you use the default method of provisioning it is when you could lead to a problem. And I want to point out that it doesn't necessarily mean it's always a problem. In our research and what we found, specifically, it's when you assign a domain controller or a work group server or computer along with domain members. The mitigations that Microsoft put in Windows Vista for pass the hash don't apply across to domain controllers, right? So just because of the way Windows authentication works, you send a hash and it's NTLM net version 2, net NTLM 2, generally, but it doesn't have to be to a domain controller. Then from those same mitigations don't apply on workgroup computers because you have to be able to log in remotely to them. So A lot of the mitigations that Microsoft put in place may protect you in most circumstances, but not when you're passing two domain controllers or workgroup computers. I don't think I answered the full question. No. What else did I?
No, but it's excellent information. That's fantastic technical information. So the question here is, this is not a vulnerability like a Windows thing that you can patch, like you would get a Windows patch for. This is a possibility within the properly operating software in order to abuse something that's meant to work, to save time, to save energy, to make your IT life better. There's a possibility to abuse something working properly to, get the rights that you're not supposed to have, to privilege escalate, basically. So, what the problem here is, and this is just like anything in Active Directory, right? So if just because Active Directory allows something does not mean it's secure. If you set it up this way and it's insecure, it's not Active Directory, or it's not their fault. It's not Active Directory's fault. It's your fault for allowing too many privileges in certain cases than in others. So we're not saying, Kasaya's software is bad, don't use it. No. That's not what we're saying here. We're using this to bring light to there are many things in the IT world that, when used properly, when set up properly, can still be abused. And it is the job of the IT asset owner, the IT asset manager, to make sure that even when things are operating properly, they're not exposing the organization to additional risk because of how they are set up, even if correctly. So I know that was a mouthful. But
so like in this situation, if you're the administrator setting this up, or you're the MSP that's coming into an organization to set this up, don't just click next. Right? Yes. It's sit down. When you make a change to the environment, understand the change, right? In this case, you're deploying accounts everywhere with the same password and same permissions, high permissions. That might not be a thing that you want to do. And depending on the organization, you could break your own security policy without even realizing it. So just slow down, sit down and say, okay, what architecture do I need to implement here? And most software, most computing platforms have many different options as to how you can configure their software, Kasaya included. So one, even when you use the LAN cache feature, you don't have to use these local defaultly generated accounts. You can specify a service account that's in the domain with the correct permissions that you control, and let Kasaya use that. Now, let me caveat that with, I didn't do any research on what that may entail or what possibilities exist for exploitation there. That we found this by accident, and we just wanted to bring this to light. And really the bigger conversation here is not about Kasaya, it's about IT owning their environment and understanding it.
Well, and when you say we found this by accident, you don't mean we found it by accident. We found it in the natural course of an entitlement review, not looking for a vulnerability.
That's correct.
So the way that you, as an IT person, take this conversation we're having and then apply it to your environment is performing regular entitlement reviews, which is it's a natural security requirement in just about every standard you can imagine, and look at all of them. Look at everything. Don't just bypass service accounts because they're service accounts. Look at that. Look at the permissions of the group and the OU and all this in Active Directory and determine what they're doing. We just did one a few days ago where we delivered one, and naturally all of the faculty of a particular organization was in the administrators group of Active Directory, the local administrators group, not the domain administrators group, but this adds you to the domain controllers as well, in this case particular, and you have the exact same scenario, but all users have the exact same permissions. So
it's scary how often we see that.
And it's true. It's that they don't, it's not that these IT people are malicious or intending malware or just lazy. This is not true. That's not the case. What occurs in this is that they are just trying to make things work the right way, and they're not understanding exactly when you click next, and you add someone to a group or something like that, stop and consider that. I know we're all busy. I know, the number of how many, can you count on two hands or one hand even, the number of IT staffs that are properly staffed with the exact amount of people they're supposed to have, right? No, you can't.
Very few.
It's very rare to find an IT staff that is properly fitted to meet the demands of the staff. So when you're installing something and you click next, you're doing it not out of ill will, but out of need to move faster.
Deadline.
Right.
We've got to get this done.
But understand that when you do that, you could be introducing a massive risk that will never be caught by a scanner. So the other thing I want to mention by this is these things that we're mentioning here are not things that are going to show up when you scan something.
That's right.
With a tool. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so I wanted to bring that out too. So you mentioned the entitlement reviews and looking at the service accounts, looking at these accounts. So let's say your entitlement review process is you go and we're going to look at domain admins, we're going to look at administrators on workstations, servers, domain controllers. You come across these accounts, you see all the accounts that are assigned to your people, and you know, okay, those are right, those should be there. And you see another account that's, FS admin. Oh, well, I know that goes with Casaya. Don't gloss over that. Don't say, well, I know what the account is, and go, okay, well, that's okay. Ask the questions, does this need that permission?
Right.
Should this be here? What does it actually do? Can we pull this out? Can we provide the permissions that account needs in a different way? I'm shocked at how many software companies, and this is not specific to Casaya, and I don't even know that they've done this, but you look through the documentation on permissions and they go, well, just give it domain admins. You need admin rights, so give it domain admins.
Or
enterprise admins, right? That'll cover us. That'll give us all the permissions we need. That's the easiest thing to do. It is definitely the easiest thing to do, but it may not be what's required, and you may be giving it a lot more permissions than that actually needs. So don't be afraid to ask the question, right. Does this actually need this?
But the other thing we're saying here is that we understand the IT process, right? So we don't want you to listen to this and then go, if you're using this software to go down to your people and say, I want all the FS admin accounts to be ripped out and taken out. No, don't do that. One of the other things we have to be cognizant of is when you make a change, you have to be aware of what impact the change is going to have on your environment, right? So if you shut everything down, but you're secure,
now you can't deploy software.
Right, there's no point in doing anything. I mean, so there's no point in even having IT infrastructure at that point. So we're not so security focused. We're not so confidentiality focused, I'll say, that we don't care about availability at all. Availability has to be thought of too. So you have to consider when you're looking at this problem, what that change is going to have in your environment before you decide to just change it all of a sudden. So we're not under any understanding that we expect everyone to just go rip this thing out. And no, that's not at all what we're saying. Just be aware. You just need to be aware of the risks. And not all risks can be scanned by a scanner. That is certainly not the case. Just because you don't have any highs or criticals on your vulnerability scan does not mean you don't have absolutely critical or severe issues in your environment that can be exploited momentarily, even by, this doesn't have to be a pen tester or a skilled hacker. This could be ransomware that is just meant to look for local accounts in the administrator and then ransomware does this.
The new worms, what was that, Eternal Blue, but the NotPetya,
yeah.
Yeah, that leverage these techniques. Mm-hmm. They use the Eternal Blue, but then they also looked for local permissions. Right. Local accounts, privileged accounts,
right.
Domain admins logged into computers. So
Yep.
They pulled these things from memory. They had a few different methods that they pulled together and tried.
Absolutely right.
And it's the same methods that every pen tester uses manually. They automated it into a worm.
It's pretty incredible, actually. That it was a very impressive. So just so everybody else understands, not all ransomware is just a piece of malware. It's not how it is. I mean, you could technically classify it that way, I guess, but often these things are automated pen testers, like AI pen testers, if you want to call it, that are extremely capable of exploiting far more than one weakness. Even, opening some of these exploitation frameworks by itself, looking for vulnerability, exploiting it. Then, I mean, literally, they run an entire pen test and then, deploy its payload, which then encrypts, across the entire environment. So, understand that just because something isn't a Windows, vulnerability or something like that, doesn't mean it can't be used in other ways. And permissions specifically is probably one of the biggest problems we see. I mean, would you agree that across your pen testing career so far that mishandled or misapplied permissions is probably at the top of the list for alternate problems?
We see it all the time, whether it's enterprise admins filled with 20 accounts or schema admins.
Right.
I mean, you're not modifying your schema of the domain regularly. You don't need that permission all the time, and very few users actually ever need that permission. Those are just two examples, but yeah, administrator access, OU permissions that we've seen just creep throughout the years, right? Where, we've got to accomplish this thing. Let's give this user or this set of users the rights to do that. Well, we don't know how to delegate the permissions, the specific permissions they need. We'll give them admin rights of this OU.
Generic all.
Yeah, generic all or something like that. Well, that also gives that user or anybody with that user's credentials the ability to deploy group policies, which may impact computers or other users that are in that OU. It's a lateral movement technique that isn't readily discernible unless you're specifically looking for it.
Right.
Can I play devil's advocate here?
Yeah,
I mean, you
sure.
mentioned IT people should be responsible, accountable to make sure what they're deploying actually makes sense for their environment. But don't you think like the software companies have some sort of responsibility to make sure that they don't make it so easy to enable or facilitate human error, I would say?
Okay, so let's just take this Kasaya thing. I definitely believe that Kasaya could have done a better job of letting the organizations buying their product know the risks of this specific thing. That said, they introduced this capability because IT asked for it. Their customers asked for this capability. Right. So they obliged, and they're in business to make money. They're in business to make their customer base happy, and that's okay, right? And this is okay. There's definitely a spot for this, right?
Absolutely.
It just needs to be understood where that spot is, and not use those default accounts blanket across the environment.
So when you ask, what is so Casaya is the target of opportunity, we'll say, just because it's the subject of the CVE that Eric found. However, this is not just Kasaya's fault, nor do we think you should stop using their software. It's fine. It's great. Use it. The only thing is all software developers should understand themselves, for one, and then should make users aware of the action they're about to take. So when a user, when it allows you to do this function, you should, and this is a problem across the industry. It's not Kasaya's fault. It's just a problem across the industry that you need to be making people aware of the action you're about to perform. Warning, this will add someone to this account will be added to this, and there are potential significant security problems that could arise based on this function. Do you understand? Just a little pop-up window or something that just lets people know, at least in that point, they are making people aware of the action they're about to perform. And two, Obviously, yes, the user who's clicking next, the admin who's clicking next, is ultimately responsible for the action that's performed there. But the software company could certainly and should certainly, let them know what's occurring. So you're not just clicking I agree to the terms like you do for Apple and Google and Facebook and all these, and they're, they put their, we own your soul from now on, in their terms of service or whatever it is. But, they could certainly do that, but it's your responsibility. Yeah. If you're the admin that's doing that, it's your responsibility. This is kind of like our discussion on cloud. On how everybody assumes that you're doing risk transference because you're using someone else's, but it's the same thing. You're really not. You're not transferring risk because you're using someone else's process to make your life easier. Just because you're using their software does not mean they are responsible for what you do with that software in your environment. You are still responsible. And so it's something that needs to be understood. So one thing I want to kind of hit before we move out of this is, in one, Eric, what can an IT admin that knows, just so it's clear, that knows they use Kasaya do to check their own environment for this? And then two, what do we do in general about this problem? It's not just Kasaya's problem. It's an entitlement review problem. What do you do? A few easy steps for an IT admin to start looking into these.
Well, so one, if you use Kasaya and you use the LAN cache feature, check to see if you're using the default accounts. And you're going to see these in your environment if you are. Look for FS admin. If you've deployed the RMM and assigned the LAN cache, the domain controller to a LAN cache as a client, you're going to see this account in your domain. And even if you didn't deploy this to all your domain controllers, this will exist on all your domain controllers just by the way domains function. So if you see that, and you see that it's in the administrators group, well, you know that this applies to you. Also look on your servers, look on your workstations. If you see these accounts anywhere, and it could be, and this organization that we found this on, they had gone through multiple iterations of this. They had 4 or 5 of these that were from previous deployments of LAN cache. So even if you say, okay, well, we had, this feature, we deprecated it, we no longer use it, you still may be at risk from these accounts if they exist in your environment, even if they haven't been used in years. And then the second question.
So the broader question is, out of that, this lends to, it's more than just Kasaya that's the problem here. It's not just Kasaya, and nor do, they understand that this is there. So again, we're not saying don't use this software. Across your entire environment, this lends to a bigger issue of wide entitlement review across your environment. So how do you go about starting that process?
Yeah, so the entitlement review process, one, you've got to pull the data, right? Depending on the size of the environment, it's not easy to get that data, and we've spent a lot of hours developing methods to do this. And if you're using your firewalls correctly and you're doing a lot of the other permissions things correctly, you actually could run into some hurdles yourself on gathering this data. But gather the data. Gather it from your workstations. Know what local accounts exist. Know what local group memberships exist. Gather it from your servers, your member servers. Gather it from your work group servers, any work group devices you have. Gather it from your domain, and then look at it holistically, right? You can't go, okay, well, we're going to do an entitlement review of domain admins and stop there, right? The local accounts that exist, even on workstations, do matter. Yep. And they matter even more when they share a password with some other account in the domain.
That's excellent. Which, by the way, our foundational assessment does this process. Mm-hmm. It looks at everything from enterprise admins all the way down to non-administrator local users. He's not going to do this, but a shameless plug for Eric, who is our original developer of the foundational assessment.
No way, that's
Eric
awesome.
Originally created it himself. That's one of the primary things that, and I'll let you kind of mention this too, but out of creating that was one of the primary things that you saw as absolutely necessary to do, no matter what environment you're in, because of the level of risk that entitlement exposes to your organization and the inability to see it as vulnerability with a tool or anything else.
Yeah, so to your point, the reason we came up with this particular assessment is to maximize the findings, what we could provide insight into an organization most efficiently. So we developed the processes to gather the data efficiently. We want to provide the best, a lot low-hanging fruit's not the right word, but what every organization needs to do at a bare minimum, right? It's local accounts exist, domain accounts exist, group memberships exist, permissions exist within the environment, vulnerabilities are there. You have to patch, you have to manage your accounts, you have to manage your group memberships. And that's just a few of the things that come out of our assessment. We've built it over the years, but it started as what does every organization need to do with the 80-20 rule? 20% of the effort generally creates 80% of the results. What 20% of the effort could we provide to provide 80% of what an organization needs to do to get themselves to a baseline level? That's what FSA
yes,
is.
That's perfect. So there's really, and kind of the point of the FSA is everybody wants to do a pen test or needs to do a pen test. Not until you've done this. Not until you've done this, you don't. Because everything that we find in a foundational assessment is an easily used technique to conduct a penetration test and for us to succeed quickly. So until you have done a foundational assessment, there's really no reason to go do a pen test because we're going to just show you, we're going to use the stuff we find in the foundational assessment to do the pen test. So there's really no reason to go do that until you've done something like this, because we're going to be successful in most cases. I can't think of one where we haven't met our goal yet, either indirectly or directly. Sometimes people make mistakes and we get to our goal indirectly, but still, there's that's really why Eric originally developed this.
And I want to point out, our FSA is not comprehensive.
No.
Right? It's by no means comprehensive. If your organization needs to follow a framework like NIST, we have that capability too.
Yes.
The FSA is part of that, but it's not the end-all, be-all. We're not going through every framework point and saying, how are you doing each one of these? We're going into an organization and saying, okay, here's security best practice. The frameworks include these. These hit various parts of those frameworks like CIS or NIST or ISO, but they're not the complete. This FSA is not the complete framework. You should definitely do that too if you need to meet those frameworks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
I was going to ask you guys, do you have anything else you want to cover?
No, be safe out there.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a talk last year, 2 years ago it was right outside of Fort Gordon, and the head of the NSA Red Team was there, and somebody asked, what kind of security have we achieved for our country? And he's the Red Team guy, he's not the Blue Team guy, but his answer was job security for us, and that's about it. Simply because everything changes so fast. I mean, how many 9.5s have come out in the last 6 months on the CVSS?
See, that's just a whole different conversation about how we rate vulnerabilities. But to that point, it's insane just how fast these things are coming out.
Right. And
how dangerous they are.
Right. How critical. It's one thing to have something that's, a 5 or a 4 or something like that. But then, which again, your conversation, we can have a whole nother podcast on, criticality. But, I was looking at Tenable the other day, and they rated, they found SMB and rate that as a medium. SMB version 1's a medium, right? How often do we use that in a pen test?
Quite frequently.
A relay attack, right? So it's just that, man, this changes so quickly, and it's not like you can just walk around and see all the open windows and doors. This is a different dimension, if you will, than one that we can physically see. So you need somebody that can help look at that stuff and help you interpret some of it, so you can just close it all off. And again, this is not a silver bullet. Just like Eric said, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. No product, no service, no test, no assessment is a silver bullet. But there's always things you can do to increase your posture. There's always things you can do to make it harder. And the good thing about the bad guys is they're lazy. Most of them. The vast majority of them are lazy. You know,
the ones that aren't funded by well-funded organizations.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're talking about North Korea, good luck. You're screwed. Or another 3-letter agency, you're screwed. The point, though, is that if you're going against the 99.9% of bad guys out there that are trying to make money based on their amount of effort and time, make it harder to get to you than the guy down the street or the gal down the street. You be the harder one. So that's kind of the point, is making yourself a hard enough target that they give up, they move on. And then that's how you keep yourself out of papers right there.
Yeah, absolutely. In this particular thing, that guy, if he finds this, probably isn't going to be the guy to use it.
No.
He's going to go sell it on the dark web for a couple $100.
The onion sites, yeah.
And he's going to move on.
Yep.
He's never going to be the one caught and get arrested. Some other organization is going to spend a few $100 with now they've got admin rights to some other organization, and they're going to use it. And they're the ones that are after the data, or they're going to deploy the ransomware. They're going to do whatever other thing that makes them money or reaches their goals.
Been there a while. Yeah, it's funny. It's really funny, and we kind of see the black hat as a service. We see this occur often. When we do incident response, we'll see that an account was, breached a year ago, 2 years ago, and nothing's happened. Nothing at all has happened with this account for a year or two. And then all of a sudden you have something bad happening. Well, you know what happened? Somebody breached you, did nothing else, and then went and sold that access to another organization that wishes to do exactly what Eric's saying. We see this fairly regularly.
It's often,
yeah. So anyway. We could go forever, but
I got one more thing I want to say, and this is about Casaya. They took this very seriously. All the way up to their C-suite. I was having conversations with those guys. They took it seriously. If you look at the timeline of this, we spent quite a bit of time talking through this, talking through the risks. They modeled it out in their environment. Ultimately, they made a business decision to notify their customers that this is a risk, and be careful. But there are customers that depend on it, so they're not going to deprecate it, and we don't expect them to. But I just wanted to point out that they were really nice and really good to work with on this. They took it very seriously.
So as opposed to a bad situation where they just pretend it doesn't exist or something like that, this is a kudos to Casaya. Not a don't use Casaya. This is they did the right thing in this case, as opposed to many organizations which just pretend things don't exist, like you mentioned, or no, that's not whatever. But they did the right thing. So this is a kudos to them, not a throw in mud on. No, this is not what that is. This is really just to create a larger conversation on entitlement and permissions in general, I think, is what we're really
that's the point here is IT needs to know what's going on in their environment and be willing to ask the questions. Should this be going on in my environment? Do I need this? And then go and come back and ask that question again in a year.
Right.
Because today the answer may be, we need it. A year from now it may not. Mm-hmm. So don't do it one time and think I'm done. Mm-hmm. Get that process in place.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was enlightening. Sure. Hoping to do more of this. And congratulations on finding this. That was awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Closed Beta Project. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please review, like, and share with your friends and colleagues. The Closed Beta Project is produced and hosted by me. If you have any questions, please visit our website at lockstepgroup.com. Until the next episode, have a great week.